If you zoom out across the last century of modern data, Spain's economic story is really about scale. GDP moves from $12.4 billion in 1960 to $1.7 trillion in 2024, while population shifts from 30.5 million in 1960 to 48.8 million in 2024. That tells us whether this country became. The second long-run story is about.
The short version of the last decade is about tempo. For Spain, GDP moves from $1.4 trillion in 2014 to $1.7 trillion in 2024. Population shifts from 46.5 million in 2014 to 48.8 million in 2024. Life expectancy goes from 83.2 years in 2014 to 83.9 years in 2024. And military spending changes from $18 in 2015 to $37.7 billion in 2024.
Andorra is a microstate wedged between Spain and France, and that geography alone makes it a puzzle. With a GDP of just $4 billion in 2024, less than 0.3% of Spain's $1.7 trillion, and a population of 81,938, Andorra doesn't fit the usual playbook for neighbors. It has no military budget worth tracking, yet its tax system, border disputes with France, and EU accession talks force Madrid to treat it like a full-fledged player, not a pawn. This is the kind of relationship where friction, bargaining, and selective cooperation coexist in a tight, high-stakes space. France isn't just next door, it's the elephant in the room. With a GDP of $3.2 trillion in 2024, nearly double Spain's $1.7 trillion, and military spending at $64.5 billion versus Spain's $37.7 billion. Paris sets the terms for much of Europe. But geography complicates things. The shared 623-kilometer border means this isn't just an economic rivalry, it's a daily negotiation over trade, migration, and even cultural influence. Madrid has to calculate whether its prosperity comes with strings attached, or if there's room to maneuver. Gibraltar is a 6.8 square kilometer British territory clinging to Spain's southern coast, and that tiny footprint packs a punch. With no usable GDP or military data, yet a population of just 39,329, it's a thorn in Madrid's side, symbolically, strategically, and economically. The UK's refusal to budge on sovereignty, NATO's presence, and fishing rights disputes mean this relationship is less about scale and more about leverage, symbolism, and the limits of patience. It's a test of whether Spain can play the long game, or if frustration will dictate policy.
Portugal is small but stubborn, with a GDP of $313.3 billion in 2024, less than a fifth of Spain's, and a military budget of $5.5 billion compared to Madrid's $37.7 billion. Yet Lisbon has its own agency. It's the only neighbor that can claim shared history, language, and EU leverage without being dwarfed by Madrid. The 1,200-kilometer border isn't just a line on a map. It's where regional disputes over water, fishing, and even identity spill across. This is awkward coexistence at its finest. Neither side can ignore the other, but neither wants to bend too far.
Morocco isn't just a neighbor, it's a bridge and a barrier. With a GDP of $160.6 billion in 2024 and a population of 38.1 million, Rabat is a middle power that Spain can't afford to alienate, yet its claims on Western Sahara and migration pressures keep Madrid on edge. The 19-kilometer land border at Melilla is a flashpoint, but it's the maritime borders in the Strait of Gibraltar where this relationship gets truly tense. Here economics, security, and geography collide, forcing Spain to balance between partnership and caution. The U.S. isn't just a distant superpower, it's the gravitational center of Europe's security. With military spending at $929.2 billion in 2025, 24 times Spain's $37.7 billion, and an economy 16 times larger, Washington sets the rules for NATO, trade, and global influence.
China's shadow looms over Spain, but it's not just about GDP, it's about leverage. With a military budget of $335 billion in 2025, nearly 9 times Spain's $37.7 billion, and an economy 11 times larger, Beijing demands attention. But distance creates breathing room. Spain's Atlantic position and EU ties soften the blow. Yet China's investments in ports like Barcelona and its push for Mediterranean influence mean Madrid can't ignore the calculus, security versus economic opportunity.
Russia is a hard power that Spain can't afford to underestimate, yet it's not an existential threat. With military spending at $158 billion in 2025, 4 times Spain's $37.7 billion, and an economy just slightly larger, Moscow is a wild card. But geography plays a role. Spain's distance from Russia and its EU alignment dilute the risk. Still, energy dependence, NATO commitments, and regional influence games mean Madrid can't treat this as a distant conflict. It's a balancing act with no easy moves.
India is too big to ignore, yet too far to control. With a GDP of $3.9 trillion in 2024, more than double Spain's, and military spending at $93.3 billion, nearly 2.5 times Madrid's, New Delhi demands strategic caution. But distance matters. Spain's Atlantic position and EU ties mean it's not caught in the crossfire of India's regional ambitions. Here, the game is about economic opportunity, trade, investment, and soft power, while keeping security concerns in check.
The UK is a fading giant, but its shadow still stretches. With GDP at $3.7 trillion in 2024 and military spending at $88 billion, more than double Spain's, London remains a player. But Brexit changed the rules. No longer part of the EU, the UK now has to navigate its relationship with Madrid on its own terms.
Japan is a distant but critical partner, economically, militarily, and strategically. With GDP at $4 trillion in 2024, nearly 2.5 times Spain's, and military spending at $59 and 1.6 times Madrid's, Tokyo sets the pace for security cooperation in Asia. But distance is both a blessing and a curse. Spain's Atlantic position means it's not directly in Japan's crosshairs, yet its EU ties make it a key player in global trade negotiations. This is a balancing act between strategic alignment and economic pragmatism.